Ultimately, it came down to tone. But before we tell you what is our most anticipated indie deck builder, it's important to figure out how we got to that decision.
Before jumping in, we just want to take a few seconds out of your day. If at the end of the video you enjoyed it, subscribe and see more like it. Video games is a positivity-first gaming outlet. We believe that gaming should be a force for good. We focus on making uplifting content with constructive discussions and celebrating what makes games great.
Welcome back to another installment of Versus, a segment where we take a look at two highly anticipated upcoming games that have a lot of similarities and stack the titles against each other. This time, we're going to be comparing two of the best looking and most anticipated upcoming original IP deck building titles. But first, two games will never be the same, and one of these fantastic looking titles will always have a slight edge and will be labeled the winner. However, we love games, celebrating them, and comparing two amazing titles is only going to bring more attention to both, which is a win-win scenario. As mentioned, this time around we're going to be heading into the deck building genre by comparing Howl and Shroom and Gloom. If you want to see some of our previous installments where we compared two highly anticipated ninja reboots like Ninja Gaiden Ragebound and Shinobi Art of Vengeance, link will be in the description. When I first got the press release for Howl that said Souls-like deck builder, I was extremely skeptical, probably like you are right now. Genre fusion isn't anything new, but how could a deck builder possibly incorporate Souls-like elements? When the term Souls-like comes to mind, you think of dark and oppressive worlds that are full of death and decay, an isolated protagonist facing tremendous odds as they journey forwards on their quest as they face grotesque and ungodly creatures. In terms of mechanics, there's the combat that requires more brains than brawn with timing and patience, a bonfire system to restore health, but also for enemies to respawn. Then there are the souls that can be lost, but also play an integral role in the ability to upgrade the protagonist, allowing you to even the odds with enough determination. With the exception of real-time combat, Howl tweaks a few things to fit into deck building, and instead of using souls to augment your strength or intellect, you craft new cards from many different categories. You could also argue that in place of stamina in battle, Howl gives you action points to use your wits and decide when to attack and when to defend, as patience and timing is a crucial element of deck builders. Finally, one of the most underrated elements of Souls-likes is the bosses. Larger than life, grotesque, and extremely challenging are the bare essentials. And based on my time with the demo and seeing the trailers, Howl nails this. In Howl, you play as a mother who, after a ritual, has been transported to the spirit realm in a desperate search of her recently deceased son. Exploration takes place from an almost isometric perspective with Diablo-style controls as you click where you want to move, but the combat takes place on a grid with a turn-based system that requires a tactical approach. Howl wastes very little time and instantly provides the player with a rich, atmospheric world. The art style has a gorgeous minimalist approach, the score is haunting, the gameplay is challenging, and the UI is intuitive. The one downside is that I tried to play Howl on the Steam Deck, which works, but requires the use of a touchpad in the place of a mouse. Connecting Steam Deck to a keyboard and mouse provided a much more seamless experience, but fully optimizing Howl for Steam Deck should be a very high priority for the studio, as having the ability to play deck builders in handheld mode is almost an essential requirement. Combining the terms deck building and Souls-like seems like a bit of a stretch, but after playing Howl, it makes perfect sense and feels wholly unique. The demo does an incredible job of establishing the universe, gives a feel for the majority of the mechanics, and teases what lies ahead in your journey, including the many biomes that await, and with optimized Steam Deck controls, I look forward to more of this journey through the spirit realm. Back at the end of 2024, I compiled a list of the best looking and most anticipated deck builders scheduled for release in 2025. One of the games on the list was an extremely unique looking first-person dungeon crawling roguelike deck builder known as Shroom and Gloom from Team Laserbeam, a small 8-person team from Cape Town, South Africa. At that point in time, Shroom and Gloom was only a small prototype, which it probably still is, but the big news is that Team Laserbeam have just announced that Devolver Digital will be publishing Shroom and Gloom, which is great news for the studio and for fans of deck builders. Not only does this mean that the team will be able to take something that was initially created in a game jam in 2021 into a full product, but it is also a great indication of the quality of the game beyond what most people have seen, as Devolver Digital have a pretty good track record of signing games with unique ideas and solid gameplay. Shroom and Gloom is a first-person roguelike dungeon crawling deck builder. It has the staples of deck builders that you're familiar with, including upgrading cards, getting rewards at the end of combat, and resting to heal along the way during your journey. However, Shroom and Gloom feels anything but ordinary and familiar. Shroom and Gloom is instantly captivating with a very strong sense of identity thanks to its combination of bold art style and the unique first-person perspective that is an extreme rarity in the deck building genre. Shroom and Gloom also features a very moody tone and immaculate atmosphere. Both are definitely common elements of Devolver Digital published titles. The soundtrack features subtle synth and the sound direction is immersive. You can practically feel your socks getting wet as you trudge your way through the dungeons. However, the gameplay is the real focal point as it features two separate decks, one for combat, as well as a different deck to pillage and explore the dungeons. Having two decks provides a much more meaningful gameplay impact than I was expecting. It feels almost like two different games combined, as strategy is needed for exploration as well. This is likely just the tip of the iceberg, but during exploration, you have the choice to use a key to open a lock if you have the card, but there is also the ability to bash the lock open at the cost of doing damage to yourself. It's easy to imagine choices like this becoming increasingly difficult as you must weigh risk versus reward. Cards can also be infinitely upgraded, which means customization is endless and broken builds are possible. You don't need to take my word, Shroom and Gloom currently has a demo available on Steam with early access planned for late 2025. However, it was just at the end of 2024 that the studio said Shroom and Gloom was in early prototype phase, and at the start of the demo says expect some jankiness, so set expectations accordingly, as it isn't the smoothest experience at the moment, but it does show a very high potential. It's worth reiterating this one more time. Both of these games look incredible, which is why they are the two best looking upcoming deck builders. But there can only be one, and ultimately, it came down to the tone of Death Howl, which is much heavier, and the story, which is more relatable and will be a driving force to push yourself farther. Whether you're a parent or not, we have all lost someone dearly, and going to the ends of the world and beyond is something that all of us would do if we could help. Dealing with the death of her son, Ro goes into the afterlife in search of him in a desperate attempt to defy death and return her son to the world of the living. Guided by the voices of another world, Ro transcends to the spirit realm. At the core of both of these experiences is playing cards, but what's really going to immerse you is the story. You need an engaging narrative. Death Howl is described as an atmospheric tale of grief, healing, and resilience. The director of Death Howl fully understands how impactful these themes are to the human condition. The loss of a loved one is universal, an inevitable part of the human experience. We've introduced a fresh take on the deck builder genre, combining with Souls-like exploration and adding compelling lore to leave a lasting impact. Let me know in the comments below what your most anticipated deck builder is at the moment. That's all for today, but until next time, be good to your fellow gamer, but more importantly, be better to your fellow human.